What's up, you guys? This is Adam Gillespie with Rancid and Sweaty Calves coming at you with yet another video. And I did not know that there was a new James Bond book out. Mainly because the majority of what's gone on with James Bond in recent history has been pretty lackadaisical and not exactly the best content that someone wants to put their interest in. And oftentimes when I'm reading through or watching a James Bond movie in recent history, all I'm seeing is a bunch of move towards political ideologies that are, a little bit harmful towards the progression of society. And this new book by Charlie Higson on His Majesty's Secret Service is apparently horrible. Now, I'm going to show you guys some of the reviews here, because I do find them quite interesting. It's got a 3.8 out of 5 rating, which seems a little bit off from the views that I've seen. We've got Gary Rowan, who actually does talk about how amazing this book is and that and the other. But right here, the second review that's pinned is from this guy called Q Hawkman. I don't know if that's actually how you pronounce it, or Q Hawkman. I don't know. Anyways, this is his review. I'm just going to read out his review. I'm going to read out a couple other reviews. I'll read out a positive review as well, but I'll give you guys a rundown of what I know about the book before reading that review. So if you wanted to watch this, pause it, before I start ranting, go ahead and do that. You can read it yourself. I will be reading it myself, so you don't necessarily have to do that. But here's what I've heard about the book. What I've heard about the book is that James Bond is no longer the cold-hearted, womanizing Secret Service member of the Majesty's Secret Service who fights for continued peace within the British Empire, or the UK. Instead, what he is kind of a wimpy, simpy guy who has an open relationship with enemies of his, and his enemies are people who don't go along with mainstream media, don't accept something about COVID restrictions. They actively deny COVID restrictions. They don't believe in the government is out for their best interest. A bunch of other things like that, where it's kind of like, oh, so average people with brains that they can think about things themselves with, Average people who have their own thoughts and their own beliefs. People who don't conspire to, feminism, and people who don't conspire to transgender ideology, and people who don't conspire or conform to COVID restrictions and COVID lockdowns and all this other stuff with COVID. That was apparently a big thing in this book. And I think that there was actually an instance in the story where James Bond was more grossed out by the fact that his arch nemesis's hiring practices didn't include 50% women, rather than the fact that he was his arch nemesis. So that just kind of tells you what's going on with this book. And these are just, I'm being totally legitimately serious. I'm not making any of this up. This is what I've heard about the book. I haven't read it myself yet. I might not. I don't know if I want to spend $19 just so I can have some feminist, liberal propaganda shoved down my throat. But here we go. I'm going to read you this review right here from a Bond fan of 50 years. And he starts off as a Bond fan of 50 plus years, I've experienced good and bad, including some of Fleming's work. Part of the good has been Higgson's excellent set of young Bond novels, and I've long hoped to see an adult Bond work from him. This, however, is not what I wanted. Following the excellent work by Anthony Horowitz, I was hoping that perhaps an author with an equal grasp of the original novels would take over. Well, this isn't it. Most of the updating is generally unobjectionable, if boring, but nearly every other page includes a political diatribe, yet yanks you out of the story. It started as shocking, considering the source, because faithfulness to Fleming's work was always a Higson hallmark, but once this turned into his list of Festivus grievances, I began losing interest. I thought Boyd's solo was awful for grafting contemporary politics into a period piece, but I might reevaluate that work following this. I have generally appreciated Mr. Higgson's work, and while I'd like to see something else from him, I'd really prefer a contemporary take following on Deaver's carte blanche more than this. So that's a pretty damning piece of evidence right there. Here's one from John D. Pride. I wonder if this guy's a bot. Bond was at his most relevant during the Cold War, when the world faced a common enemy. Then the enemy was on foreign soil. And the most dangerous threat facing the U.S. and Britain and many other countries in this domestic, far-right extremists who masquerade as patriots in order to burn civilization to the ground. Violent nationalists who operate as a cult to honor the twisted schemes of a false idol that uses them for personal gain. Many are the days during the past several years when I've thought, where is our James Bond? We need him now more than ever. Well, here he is, stepping in to avert the evil plans of the self-appointed king and his sad army of grievance-ridden lunatics who are easily plied and manipulated into battle. Good show, Mr. Higson. Wow. So this guy just listed every talking point that a leftist would ever use. So I don't know if this guy is a bot or if he's just brainwashed. The main threat to the U.S. today is not the violent extremists on the left who rioted for months on end during the BLM stuff, but in fact are the peaceful protesters who calmly entered into the U.S. Capitol when they were invited in by police and then were only rowdy when a Fed riled them up. The most threatening thing to America in the modern day is people who don't like it when other people kill people. The most threatening thing in the modern United States of America is pro-life activists who calmly say they don't want babies to be killed in the womb. The most threatening thing to the U.S. and America and to Britain today are people who don't want to go along with stupid COVID restrictions because they have zero scientific bearing. Dude, can you have any less thought of your own when it comes to this? The Bond book we need right now. This guy is treating a fictional character as though he is some sort of legitimate savior. As though right-wing extremists will read this book and go, oh, I finally understand my political opponents. I'm going to turn away from everything that I've ever done in history and support only leftism and completely weird gender ideology that preys on little children and the Green New Deal, which would destroy our society and rid people of being alive on the planet and destroy everything else. Global cooling, by the way, folks, is not a good thing. It kind of is necessary for heat and large amounts of it to exist for crops to grow in certain climates. Otherwise, you don't have those crops. Wow, who would have freaking guessed? Sorry about that diatribe, but nevertheless, there we are. Another one. I'm going to read you this one. Felt rushed and contrived, from James Worrell. Way too much a product of the time and current zeitgeist. Demagogue who comes across as a nationalist but really is just rich, trying to get richer by playing on prejudice as misguided nationalism. Bond girl has to be an aggressor or risk backlash from Me Too types. Dialogue is so over the top as to be off-putting, like Horowitz Bond novels better. Shame, as I really wanted to like this going in. That seems like a pretty well-rounded one. There are some things that I disagree with him on in this little statement of his, but I also agree with him on a lot in this statement. I would guess that this guy's probably more centrist and not necessarily politically inclined towards one direction or the other. Here's this guy, Eric. James Bond is back in brilliant form. Higson created a fleeting spy adventure that is relevant and does not slant into political opinions. Oh, wow! That certainly is something to say. It resonates with recent situations that most of us are well versed on, whether we take sides or merely are up to date on current affairs. Bond himself is so well written here, like Fleming had a fellow author acquaintance whom he permitted the rights to create a standalone novel with his beloved series. So this guy describes pretty much nothing about it, except gets everything wrong about it. Young Bond with dirty words. So this person right here doesn't even sound like they have an issue with the politics of Higson, or Higgins, whatever his name is. It's okay, but to me it reads like a young adult novel where the author is allowed to include adult language. It's competent, but it's been well publicized. It was a written rush, and for this reason I can't decide if I'd like Higgins to write another Bond novel. Probably not. That person right there is just describing the quality of the writing, not even any political debate regarding what goes on in the story. This person right here obviously cares more about the story than the politics, which is what everyone should care about. And I applaud them for being like, yeah, it kind of felt like someone was just writing an immature story but had bad words in it, and that's about the extent of what this story offers to the reader. I completely fall into line with that sort of thought process. Like, yeah, great. What's the solution to that? What's the solution? So what's the solution to writing a bad story? The solution is obviously to learn from the greats and figure out how to write a story that matches that level of quality. When I started writing my novel, which I'm still working on the editing process of and figuring out how I'm going to support myself to actually get it published, but when I started writing the full-length, like 300-page novel that I wrote, I went directly towards the novelist, to the writer that I admired most in terms of fictional storytelling, Tolkien. I went straight to Tolkien. I went, how did he describe things? And I found out he had a genius way of doing things. So when I started describing things in the story, I used that method to the best of my ability. Now, did I only use Tolkien as an example? Of course not. You have to use multiple examples so that you can get a better outcome than just kind of being a lesser version of a artist or a author or a singer or a painter or whatever other ist or that you're trying to emulate. You have to use don't just try to copy one person. Multiply and use different styles. Add a bunch of things together to make something more compelling and interesting. That's what I do with my art as well. I probably have a list of 4 or 5 artists that I use on a regular basis as reference. The most common one that I'll go to, though, for like inking and figuring out how to do the shading and process like that's got to be Jorge Jimenez. The way he does shading on that is just incredible. So when I'm doing my comic book art, I'm trying to use Jorge Jimenez style shading, and I am by far nowhere near as good as Jorge Jimenez, and I don't think I ever will be. And if I ever had the ability to hire him to work on one of my comics, I would hire him in a heartbeat, and I don't care how much it would cost, because I just love the way that he does his art. It's amazing. He's my favorite comic book artist of all time, and like right next to him is, just like that, I'm forgetting his name. Forgot his name, unfortunately. I wish I didn't. He's a great artist. He really is amazing. He really is an amazing artist. It's a shame that I'm forgetting his name right now. But regardless, what I'm saying is learning how these things work. Learning how good stories are developed. Understanding, first and foremost, the way that a story occurs. You have your incipient stage of the story, the beginning portion, where everything seems hunky-dory. Everything kind of comes up all flowers and roses. Or you're just starting off in an underdog story. And you're just getting to the part of the story where something is going to start happening in the near future. You have these steps that kind of lead into the initial process. You have the theme stated, you have what's going to go on, you get the setup, and then the payoff is the rest of the story. The payoff is everything that occurs after the setup, leading up to the ultimate endpoint. There has to be a moment in the story where a character faces some situation that they can't overcome, and it makes it more compelling. If they can overcome everything, then it's just this boring slog of like, oh, here we go again, the hero is just gonna win. But if you actually put the character in a situation that causes them trouble, it's going to work better. And from the looks of it, this story might not do that. It might just focus on young adult content and might just focus on, oh, look at this, there's a political thing going on in the world, and I'm going to use it as reference for my writing, and here we are. And it just gets old, because there's no attention to the actual process of creating a story anymore. All the attention is spent on getting across a political ideology, and that comes from both the right and the left. More so the left, because of the fact that they hold far more power in the entertainment industry than the right. But when the right gets their ability to do something like this, it ultimately just becomes more politics. So we have films on both sides of the political aisle that are exclusively about the politics of the story and not the story. And it makes the entire story mute. Now, you can tell a political story in a well-written, well-rounded story, and it makes all the difference in the world. For instance, I noticed that there's some pretty heavy leftist ideology in some of my favorite cartoons when I was growing up, like Justice League Unlimited. The whole conflict that goes on in one of the arcs of the story, in the Cadmus arc of the Justice League Unlimited show, is that they have a big gun in space that they think is going to threaten the entire universe, and they actually get rid of the defensive protocol of the Watchtower so that people can feel safer on Earth, completely opening themselves up to attack from entities from beyond the void of space, which happens at the end of the series. Now, the superheroes come out on top ultimately because they're superheroes and they have superpowers, but think about the ridiculousness of that. That's something I grew up with, and I had no idea about the political connotations of it or the political inclinations of it until recently. And I still love the show because even though there's that potential political conversation is in there, at least it was well oriented. At least they brought you into a situation where the worst occurred and they didn't even take into account the other things. What you got to see on the story was a reasonable reaction to people in a high stress, high emotional situation. And I loved that because it showed an effort to make the decisions, which made zero sense in terms of my understanding of how the world works, right? It made sense within the context of the show. So the only way that we're going to get away from all this bad writing and all this writing that focuses exclusively on politics and, maybe some bad words here and there is focusing first and foremost on learning how to develop a story from the ground up and creating something new based off of the old world. Super simple. That's the solution. Learn how things are written, learn how things work, and then figure out how to make something unique with it. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked for storytelling throughout all of time. And once you get that down, it's so simple. Anyways, that's going to do it for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, please make sure to leave a like, comment down below your thoughts, share this video out there with your friends, subscribe and hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss a video that I upload, and check me out on my different socials, including my Rumble, which is Rancit, capital R-A-N-T-S-I-T, all one word, no space. You can find me on Rumble at Rancit, capital R-A-N-T-S-I-T, all one word, no space. You can also find me on Twitter and several other places which I leave links to in the description below. But regardless of all of that, I appreciate you guys for watching. If you don't like me, I also appreciate you guys watching until this far. And if you do support me, I really, really appreciate the fact that you guys have subscribed. And those who would subscribe, I appreciate you're going to subscribe. I love you guys. You really are awesome. 4.2 thousand views on the Amber Heard video. I never thought I'd get that. It's incredible. It really is. And I can't wait to continue to grow this channel with you guys and create a better fellowship. That being said, I do hope you guys have a great day and a great rest of the week.